Hi, everyone, and welcome to Get Hired Live. I'm your host, Andrew Seaman, LinkedIn's managing editor for jobs and career development. I'm so happy to have you here today, as always, and I want to ask you, like I always do, to introduce yourselves in the comments. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and also what you want to do in your job search or career. And I think it's always great to sort of share what your goals are, and that way other people can see, they can feel less alone, and they can network with you. So after you introduce yourselves, look for other people in the comments who maybe are looking for the same thing you are in the middle of a job search. Maybe they're moving into a field that you know something about, or you want to move into a field that they have expertise in. Connect with each other and you can network. You can maybe even job search together. You could talk about your career development together. It's really the foundation of a successful job search or career to build those bridges and build those relationships. Some of the best notes that I get after these shows are from people who meet each other in the comments and they end up having Zoom meetings together. They end up having group chats about their resumes or some of their job search struggles. So make sure that you're building that community, and you could do that in the comments. And of course, get your questions in, because today we are talking all about goal setting and how to reach those goals. And we have someone who knows all about that. And I can't wait to bring them onto the screen because they are also the LinkedIn Learning instructor with the most popular course from the past year. So of all LinkedIn Learning courses, this is the course that people flock to, and it was about OKRs. So I want to bring on Jessie Withers, who works in Google's people development team, and she is an expert when it comes to development, but also goal setting and achieving those results. So welcome, Jessie.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you so much for joining us. And before we get started, I do want to say hi to a few people who are in the comments, because we have a bunch of people joining us. We have Yolanda and Dolores from Texas, our good friends, Ashley from the UK, Janet from Washington, D.C., Ivy from Ghana, Kimberly from North Carolina. I was just there. So beautiful. Stephen from Atlanta, Harshal from India. We have Kian from Singapore and KJ from California. So welcome to all of you. Keep introducing yourselves in the comments and also get your questions in. So Jessie, I want to start by asking you a little bit, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and your career.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And also welcome everyone. So thrilled to see you in the comments and tuning in from across the globe. As Andrew mentioned, I'm Jessie Withers. I'm tuning in here from my home office in Santa Barbara, California. My background, my academic foundation is in business and organizational psychology. And I've always really known that I'd work at the intersection of people development, strategy, and culture in some capacity. I'm really interested in understanding and learning about what makes folks thrive and the systems and process and frameworks that really enable teams and organizations to do their best work. So I think that's why in my career, I've really found such a home in tech. I currently work in people development at Google. I started my career out at Salesforce and have spent a number of years in other tech companies in consulting. And my organizational development expertise spans really a couple areas, being change management, program design, employee engagement, onboarding, corporate strategy, executive communications, instructional design, and learning and development. So I'm really passionate overall about the power of collective effort and empowering teams to set and achieve strategic goals. And I've seen it in action. I've seen folks come together and set audacious goals, and I've seen how that changes individuals and the team and the business. And most importantly, the culture. So throughout my entire career, each decision I've made and really investing in my professional development, at the end of the day, I've really been a learner, and I'm most passionate about sharing knowledge to empower others.
That's fantastic. And yeah, and Salesforce, Google, and those are heavy hitters when it comes to business and growth. And really, you're not going to walk through the hallways there of those companies or here at LinkedIn or Microsoft without hearing the acronym OKRs. And really, here basically, we talk about OKRs and things like that all the time. And Jessie, you recently learned that your LinkedIn Learning course, which our producers will be dropping into the comments so people can check out, which is called Goal Setting, Objectives, and Key Results, which is where the acronym OKRs come from, was the most popular course over the past year. Can you tell us a little bit about what OKRs are and a little bit about why you think people flock to that course, because obviously, LinkedIn Learning is very popular. They have a lot of courses. So it's quite a feat to actually be the most popular course on the entire platform.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, I'm just so humbled by their response, right? And just seeing the impact across the world. I'm so fortunate at the DMs that I get on LinkedIn from, every country in the world on a daily basis, folks talking to me about, how they've applied the framework. It's so fulfilling, and I'm so grateful for the recognition. But it's really about the impact and hearing from the learners. So yeah, thank you for calling that out. And for those of you who haven't seen it or aren't familiar, OKRs is a strategic goal setting framework. So it's really something to help organizations, teams, and individuals, you can use it at work or in your personal life, to really set thoughtful goals in order to move your life, your team, your work in a certain strategic direction. So it's a framework of how to set those goals using the O, which stands for objective, and then measurable key results, which are the KRs. So that's where you get the acronym. And when I think about why this might have resonated with folks, a couple things come to mind. Just really drawing parallels with what's been going on in the world. I'm curious if there is a relationship between, organizationally, I feel like companies are really adjusting to managing and developing a new distributed workforce. And I think organizational cultural norms are shifting to meet that new type of workforce. And over the last 2.5 years, especially, I think the task of rallying an entire group of employees around a single strategy or even just a direction, I think it's both gotten increasingly more challenging, and at the same time, it's become increasingly more important. So I think that might be one point of resonation for folks. I think also, OKRs offer the ability to pivot. So it is a framework you can use to set a direction and then really effectively, learn from it and change and do it quickly. So I think we're all pivoting right now, companies, individuals, families, and we're all changing up our strategies, right? In work and life, we're entering new markets. We're diversifying and developing products and services. We're shifting roles. We're finding new jobs. We're reimagining what our work days look like. OKRs help with all of that. And then I think lastly, OKRs and just being clear about what you need to achieve, what your priorities are, and how you're tracking against those goals also provides folks a sense of control.
Yeah. And I think, how it often works here is that, we have, I think, our overarching how we do business, but then, you have sort of the management, the leadership that sets their OKRs for sort of the organizational structure. And then each team then gets to say, okay, well, how can we help them achieve those goals? And then you set different OKRs that are still in service of their OKRs, but it's how you can help them achieve that. So it's a great way, I think, to get everyone on the same page. And like you said, you're all working and swimming in the same direction. So you don't have one part of the organization going left, the other part going right, and 3/4 going backwards. Otherwise, that's not a good way to run a company, I don't think.
Exactly. You're nailing it.
Yeah. And and I want to say hi to a few more people who are joining our stream and saying hello.
Please.
Yeah, so we have Roby from Indonesia, we have Tanisha from North Carolina, Shannon from San Francisco, Richard from New York, where I am in the Empire State Building, Lynn from Florida, Elizabeth from California, Wazi from Bangladesh, Jody from my home state of Pennsylvania, Marco from Italy, and Lisa from Oklahoma. So welcome to all of you. Like I said, keep introducing yourselves in the comments and also get your questions in. So Jesse, I think the next question is, since, the people who are watching us, maybe they're business owners or whatever, but they are people. And how can you start setting goals and OKRs for yourself as an individual? Because, we all have ambitions. We all want to do things with our lives. And also, how do you set SMART goals? Because I think, obviously, as you know, not all goals are created equally, and some goals can actually set you up for failure.
Thank you, Andrew. Wow, you're such a pro. Are you sure you just don't want to leave this session?
Oh, no.
No, it's a great prompt, and yeah, it's wonderful to put out, a professional development centric course and teach business skills. But yeah, at the end of the day, we're all human beings, and if you can't apply this stuff to your personal life, then what are we really learning and mastering, right? So, really picking up on what I mentioned about sense of control, right? Um, Around the strategic goal setting framework and using it and really increasing that sense of, hey, I've got this. I'm confident in how I'm prioritizing my day, what I'm achieving. Research really tells us that when we have a sense of control in our personal life, at work, wherever, we feel happier, we produce better results, we're better overall human beings. So when we have and take that control, when we document our goals, when we talk to folks in our lives about our aspirations, we feel calmer, we feel clearer, and we're more empowered to produce amazing results. And I think now more than ever, the world is really calling us to ruthlessly prioritize. And as the world of work changes and social media creates all these endless opportunities to engage with digital content and experiences, I think it's really become a superpower to be able to step back and be super clear and crisp about what is and isn't a priority. So this is for leaders and teams, business owners, as you mentioned, but this is also about parents and caregivers and friends, folks that are juggling a ton of very important things all at the same time. So I think another element of it is one that folks don't talk about as much. It's really also a performance management framework. And when I say performance management, I don't mean just in the formal definition of sitting down with your manager and talking about your performance. I mean, it's really a framework where you can sit down with anyone in your life and get super clear about making sure you're on the same page and rowing in the same direction, and you're really focused on the right problems that are going to move your life in a certain direction. So it's really that framework that you can use in those meetings over time to really keep yourself accountable and focused. And then lastly, goals and strategic goal setting frameworks help us think big picture, right? They get us out of the weeds, they get us out of our day to day and just focusing on our to-do lists, our sticky tabs on our desks, our messy jotted down notes every day of 300 things we want to accomplish, and we usually only get to two. It's really up leveling that thinking and getting us clear on our purpose and where we're headed and why. And I think when we do that, we're more fulfilled and we're happier and we're less anxious and we're less stressed.
Yeah. And I think especially in the workplace, when you have OKRs or goals, I think one of the biggest benefits of that is you sort of know where your priorities start and end. So that way, when you have a large organization, I think a lot of people, they feel like, oh, I'm keeping this whole ship afloat. But when you have OKRs, you know what your responsibility is, you know what your coworkers' responsibility is. So it's not like you have to do everything. You actually know what you're in charge of. You know what your results are supposed to be. So actually, when it comes to work-life balance, it doesn't hurt you to have good OKRs or good goals, because it actually gives you sort of those boundaries to say, oh, this is Bob's job. This isn't mine.
Yeah.
So that's one of the ways I also think of it. And
Yeah.
I guess the next question I have is, like, once a person sets their goals, how do they go about reaching them? Because, obviously you could say, listen, I want to get a new job where I can be in a management role or something like that, or they want to get a promotion. But then they have to figure out, okay, but how do I go about this? And that's where those KRs come from, those key results. So how do people know what those key results are?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. I would start out by really thinking about like having that reflection, like really going inward and thinking about at work and personally, what's important to you, and not again in the sense of like things I need to do to make progress, but really about what is going to move the needle, what is going to create impact, like significant change in the world, in my life, and really get away from table stakes or BAU, business as usual, and focus on that needle moving thinking. I think once you're able to reflect on that, take the time and space to do that, you can identify your O's or your objectives, right? So those aspirational areas where you want to focus. Those are really your strategic guardrails to make sure you're headed in the right direction and you're super clear and founded in that why. And then where KRs come in, as you mentioned, these are your key results. They're measurable, they're time bound, they're specific, you really, there's no debate on if you've achieved them or not, right? I think a couple of best practices there around key results are those tangible things about measurement. And then I think there's also some intangibles. If you think about like really checking yourself, have I set the right goals? Are these the things I want to dedicate my time and energy to? It's those intangibles around like aspiration. Like are you reaching past where you think is possible? Are you stretching for that very audacious goal that scares you a little bit, right? That's a sign of a good goal. Do you have ownership or the ability to impact the goal if that's at work, right? Has this goal just been handed to you and you don't really understand it or have any, stake in the outcome? Or is it something you can really rally behind and make an impact with? Is it shared? The more people that can contribute to a goal to really increase that impact, the better. And lastly, you have to really care about it. You have to be passionate. I think if you can check your KRs and really the structure of the goal around those tangible and intangible factors, I think you'll know you're headed in the right direction.
Yeah. And one thing that I often tell people is because I speak to a lot of job seekers and people who are working on their careers is they want to set those lofty goals, but they have to be realistic about, like you said, can you actually affect change and reach those goals? So I think, the example that's often used in job seeking is a person will sit down and go, okay, I'm going to get a new job. And you know what? I'm going to get 5 interviews every week. But when they sit down, they realize, okay, I can't really control how many interviews I get because
Right.
there has to be a recruiter on the other side who's going to be booking those. And, there's a different recruiter for each company. And, they realize, oh, I'm not reaching that goal. But if you set a goal to say, listen, I'm going to network 10 hours every week. And that might be audacious for some people because maybe they're introverted. So those are sort of areas where you have to really say, okay, am I actually capable of reaching the goal I set, and doing that? Otherwise, you sort of set yourself up for failure, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's starting with the end in mind. So you give a great example with job seeking, right? Like if you start with these really tactical, I want to have this number of phone interviews. I want to, make sure my progress is unfolding in this way every week. Not only do you not have control over that, but it's not really like the why behind what you're doing, right? So one thing I would offer in terms of a tactical strategy around something with aligned with job searching is like think about what those milestones are. Like not only get really clear about your why, what company do you want to work for, what does your career look like, paint a picture, design your O's around that, right? And then back into or reverse engineer those key results. So things that you can measure, things that will help you understand if you've gotten there and why. Because you're going to make really key decisions along that process, right? Of creating that new career. And then about milestones, what you can do is be really thoughtful about those baby steps, right? I love the quote, you don't just wake up in the morning and bench 500 pounds, right? You have to every day you have to really piece out, how can I keep building on my progress to get to that end goal? So if you look at a 6-month job search, you can reverse engineer, here are the milestones I want to be, month by month. And then you have those celebration and those reflection points along the way to really check your progress, make sure you're headed in the right direction, and then also celebrate those small wins.
Yeah. And and you sort of mentioned this in that answer a little bit about sort of that mix of maybe milestones versus other maybe smaller goals. And is there any perfect sort of equation to say, oh, I should have this many small goals versus big goals? For me personally, what I usually do is I try and think of a big goal, but then I think of small goals that sort of ladder up into it. So it's sort of like chipping away at the rock. And it's like, okay, I'll get there eventually, but I have to do these small goals, and they're all in service of that big one. And is that a good approach? Is there another better approach that maybe I should be taking?
No, I think the golden rule there is you've got to find out what works for you, what keeps you motivated, what keeps you in that sweet spot of stretching but not overcommitted, right? Because if we take on too much, if every single goal is stretched to the max and you have 7 to do in 6 months, you're going to burn out. One, you're not going to achieve those goals because you're a human being and things come up, and that's a lot to take on. And then also you're going to have resistance. There's going to be some resistance there in adoption. So you're going to be less likely to get into your sheet and track your progress and be honest with yourself about how you're tracking across 7 goals, because you're going to feel overwhelmed at even the thought of it. So I think the balance for you is finding that sweet spot. Like we say, the best practice for OKRs is having 3 to 5. I recommend, 6-month OKRs to start, and really not going over those 5. I actually recommend staying closer to 3. And then in terms of the mix, yeah, it's a personal decision, a personal feeling about how big are the goals. Do you want to riddle in the small with the big? But the golden rule, I'd say, is just pay attention to making sure that you're setting yourself up for success, and you won't burn out, but you will stretch yourself to be a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah, I think that's really great advice. And I have my last question, and we're getting questions from members, so I want to make sure we get to
Oh,
those.
great.
As how things change. Like, growing up, I wanted to be a political reporter, and then I had that chance and I did it, and it turned out I thought it was really boring. It was a lot of like waiting in hallways and the Capitol building and hoping something exciting would happen. But so I realized, okay, this goal that I had, that I sort of have in front of me, is not what I expected to be. So I needed to pivot. How can people check in with their goals and say, oh, I don't think I want to do this anymore. I want to do something else. What is the process for doing that, to say, things change, my goals need to change now?
It's such a great question. And it's one, when I work with teams and organizations, that I get a lot, right? Especially in tech, with these innovative team, like the power of OKRs and how it's used in, say, engineering or product or UX. Like, a lot of it is testing out those big ideas, right? Like getting those big innovative ideas out of people's heads and into a really clear strategic framework. You can imagine that those folks who are creating these big ideas for the first time, they fail a lot. Like, and that's the point. Like, you have to get it down and test it in order to understand if it's an idea worth following through. So a lot of the times when folks set OKRs, they do find that out 2 or 3 months in. Either what you're talking about, it's the wrong goal, because I've learned all these other things along the way that actually refute my hypothesis, and this is actually not the goal we should be going after. Or the environment changes, right? We are reacting to the market. We're reacting to what's going on in the world, our teams, changes in leadership, hiring, all these different components. So there's lots of reasons to change directions. And I would say it's really healthy to do so. And in terms of the process, I think it's really about emphasizing, failing fast and failing smart, like really being able to identify quickly instead of writing the wrong goal out for months and months just because you said it. It's having that agility to stop and move folks in a different direction if you have identified that it isn't the right goal. I would just encourage folks in terms of the process to be really communicative with teams about, from the beginning of setting that goal, hey, this is an iterative framework. We're going to learn as we go. Here's what we don't know. Here's the hypothesis we're working off of. And then when you do have to make that change with folks, it's just change management, right? Like, being really thoughtful about, hey, we've been telling you this. This is what we've learned. This is why we made the decision. And this is why we think it's going to be a better route forward.
Yeah, and I think that's such great advice. And then moving into member questions, but before we do, I just want to put a request out. We're going to put a link to Jesse's LinkedIn Learning course in the comments, and Jesse hopefully will be doing a sequel, maybe a few. Everyone loves sequels, to the OKR course. So if you could give it a watch, and then also say, okay, you know what I'm still curious about, and then post about what you think would be a great sequel to that OKR course. Tag Jesse, tag LinkedIn Learning, tag me, because we want to hear your thoughts and want to know what you're left wondering, so that way the next course could be even better, and even more popular, which is hard to imagine since it is the most popular course on the platform. But yeah, please do that. Or if you've already watched it, please put your thoughts in the comments of this video, because Jesse, I know, is super interested to hear what you think. Right, Jesse?
I am. Thanks for that plug, Andrew.
Of course. And now getting into member questions, and this sort of dovetails into the last question, is that, sometimes you change goals, but sometimes you just don't reach the goals. And Charlie wants to know, how do you bounce back from maybe falling short of a goal? And, I think a lot of people, they, especially the new year, they always set those New Year's resolutions and they fail to reach them. But what's your advice for bouncing back?
Oh, Charlie, that is a phenomenal question. And again, it's something that comes up in teams time and time again. I think one disclaimer is your goals should always be audacious. As I mentioned, they should always be stretched. They should always scare you a little. They should always be that extra 30% of where you really can imagine getting there, right? Like for the first time to achieve 70% against 100% goal is really where you want to be. If you're setting an OKR and you're meeting it every time at 100%, you are setting your bar too low. You're selling yourself short in terms of the progress you can make. So I will start out by saying that. So again, it kind of depends what you're identifying as a failure, right? Or what are you saying is the definition of not achieving that goal? Because I would argue if you've taken the time to design a really strategic goal and you've made progress against that goal in some way, that you have won and that you should be celebrating your achievement because you are farther along than if you didn't set that goal in the first place. And the other lesson I would take away is like this is a practice. This is a muscle. Like some folks find this very intimidating and daunting to take on and learn and really implement within their teams and businesses and lives. And that's okay. Like we'll get better with time. I think just like keeping that attitude of like no time is really lost because you are learning along the way and you are getting closer to where you should be. I think keeping that mindset is really helpful when you use frameworks like this.
Yeah, I think that's such great advice. And, we have a question here from Lisa also about how should she think about tracking her results so she can assess her progress. And I think that's something a lot of people, they set goals and they sort of say, oh, I think I'm almost there, but they don't have the data. They don't have a piece of paper that says, oh, I'm 30% there or 40% there. How do you suggest people assess their progress?
I love this question. Thank you, Lisa. It really comes down to the size and scope of your goal, right? Like that's a definite consideration you want to take into mind. I think it's less about like a specific frequency. Like I check in once a week, I check in once a quarter. Again, it's going to depend on how big that goal is, how many folks are involved. The key is consistently check in first and foremost. So regularly hold yourself accountable, have others hold you accountable to checking in on that progress. Even if you know you are going into your check-in and you've done nothing, still do it. Put a color next to it. Give yourself a green if you've made some progress on that milestone. Give yourself a red and celebrate it if you've made no progress, because guess what? There's a check-in after that where you can make up if you are falling short. Put it on your calendar. Make an appointment for yourself to check in however frequently feels right. Put it in a spreadsheet. I really recommend just a basic Google spreadsheet to track your goals. Be super clear about your language. Create those columns for a color check-in. Make it lightweight first and foremost. Make it easy for you to just check in, even if it's 10 minutes. All of that is going to help you understand if you're tracking. And then two other things I'd mention are the milestones, which I've talked about. If you have those in place, it's much easier to see how you're tracking. And then identify a baseline, right? If you know where you've started from, even if you don't have that complex data set, but you can kind of gauge what baseline you're moving from, it's much more helpful to look and see, wow, I made a ton of progress in the right direction.
Yeah. And I think that color-coded system is so smart because I'm on a lot of emails, not necessarily for my team, but I see the color-coded system there where, you'll see that they have their OKRs listed where they say this is what we're working towards, and they'll have green, yellow, and red depending on where they are on reaching those goals. And you could see, oh, fantastic. You could celebrate the greens. You can sort of say, okay, how can we get that red to go to yellow and that yellow to go to green? So it's a really great sort of visual, even just for the emails to scan through. And, if everything's green, then you're like, great, move on, keep going.
Yeah. And I might argue if everything's green, maybe something's wrong, right? Because I think the celebration would really be in a mix of greens and yellows and reds. And I would also argue that red should be celebrated just as much as greens, because that means we're learning and we're improving, and we've taken a risk to fail, which I think is always good to have a balance.
Yeah, it's all data, and you could use it to, inform your next steps. And John has a really great question here, and this is especially for people managers out there. John wants to know, how can I help my direct reports set personal OKRs that serve both them and our team?
Oh, such a great question. I'm so glad that's top of mind for folks, because again, this is a human tool. This is a people management tool. Like, this can be used in so many great and effective and powerful ways. I think for people managers, it's really about not just like introducing this framework and dropping it in folks' laps. And like I mentioned, it's a wonderful performance management tool, but it's not something that you can just hand over and have folks write OKRs and then have them come back to you and talk about their progress. I think for it to be effective with people managers, it has to start at the top, and it has to be integrated throughout the culture and organization, right? It needs to be in your onboarding programs as you orient folks with the organization. It needs to be in your management trainings. Managers need to be trained on what this framework is, how to leverage it, how to educate folks on it. It needs to be company-wide, communications. Folks see the executives talking about OKRs, using them, holding each other accountable, starting at the top, right? Modeling that behavior. That sets people managers up to use this framework effectively. And then I think it's all about the training and handing the ownership over to folks. So here's a training you can take on OKRs. Here's best practices. Here's do's and don'ts, super simple outlines of how to write good key results. And then enforcing that and encouraging that repetitive check-in. So not only seeing it riddled throughout the organization and folks modeling it, but here is our culture, right? As a manager and a direct report, here's how we're going to use the framework in our one-on-ones monthly to make sure that you're using this to save you time and to highlight all the great things that you're hoping to share with me throughout a quarter.
Such great advice. And thank you so much, Jesse, for joining us. I think people can see why your course is so popular. You're so knowledgeable. You're so wonderful at explaining how to do these. So I really appreciate your time, and I hope people follow you on LinkedIn. I hope they watch your course. And also, don't forget, whatever you learned here today, share it on your own profile. Tag us, tag Jesse, tag myself, tag LinkedIn Learning, tag LinkedIn News. And also, after you watch Jesse's course, tell us what you're left wondering, what you want to see in her next course. Thank you so much, Jesse.
Thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure.
Yes, thank you. And thank all of you for joining us. And before we go, I just want to say that you always have great programming here on the LinkedIn News page. And in fact, next Friday, we have a show coming up with Brandy Fowler. She's going to be guest hosting for me. And she will be joined by Rachel McCord, who is the founder of the McCord List and known as the Supermodel turned Super Mogul. That's Friday, August 19th at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. They'll be talking about how to become an influencer and how to create a sustainable career out of that. I know a lot of people sort of roll their eyes when they hear the word influencer, but it's a real career. It actually is something that people set goals for now and that they are going after. So they're going to be talking all about how to be an influencer and how to make that a sustainable part of your career and life. My producer will be dropping the link to that in the comments. You could RSVP and get a notification when we go live. And then coming up on Monday, August 15th, my colleague Nina Melendez will be discussing how to get our wartime allies to safety and opportunity. She'll be talking to the director of advocacy at No One Left Behind about the efforts of evacuating and resettling Afghan and Iraqi allies. Again, that's Monday, August 15th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And that's from the LinkedIn News page. And we should be getting you a link where you could also RSVP to that. And thank you so much for joining us. Like I said, thank you to the wonderful people who make this possible, from the Empire State Building here to all over the country. We have Taisha, we have Elias, we have Derek, we have Gianna, we have Michelle, we have Wes, we have a whole army of people who make this possible. So thank you to all of you, and thank you for joining us. The world is a crazy place. I'm always so happy that we can come together and have this little gathering regularly. And don't forget to take care of yourself. You can only get hired, you can only be a good candidate, you can only get ahead in your career if you're safe and well enough to do so. So until next time, stay safe and best of luck.